My sister wore my wedding dress at the party. My revenge exposed the emails, the $1.3 million scam. My sister wore my wedding dress to her engagement party. It looks better on someone who deserves love. She laughed. The family applauded. I didn't react. Ted, I smiled, and let the screen tell the truth she'd buried. It looks better on someone who deserves love. Hila laughed, twirling in my wedding dress as our entire family applauded. I stood frozen in the doorway of her engagement party, watching my sister parade around in the dress I'd saved 8 months to buy. The dress that was supposed to be mine. The dress she'd stolen from my closet just hours before her big night. My hands trembled as I gripped my purse, feeling the weight of the remote control inside. The same remote that would soon reveal truths that would destroy her perfect evening. But first, let me tell you how I got here. How a lifetime of living in Hila's shadow led to this moment of reckoning. Before we continue, I want to thank you for joining me in sharing these stories that matter. If you believe that family betrayal should never go unchallenged and that truth deserves to be heard, please consider subscribing. It's free and helps us reach more people who need justice. Now, let's see how this unfolds. From the moment I entered this world, 3 years after her, she became the sun around which our family orbited. I remember my 7th birthday party, 20 kids from school, a chocolate cake I'd requested for weeks, and party games I'd planned with Mom. Then Isla toddled into the room wearing a princess dress, her golden curls bouncing as she giggled. Within minutes, every guest abandoned my birthday activities to fawn over my adorable little sister. The photos from that day tell the story, me standing alone by my untouched cake while everyone crowded around Isla, who basked in the attention like she was born for it. That pattern repeated itself endlessly. Christmas mornings where her squeals of delight overshadowed my quiet thank you. School concerts where Mom's camera focused exclusively on Ila's kindergarten solo while my 8th grade speech went unrecorded. Family dinners where Dad would ask about her finger paintings, while my honor roll achievements earned a distracted "that's nice, sweetheart" without him even looking up from his plate. By high school, I'd learned to measure my worth in shadows. When Hila made varsity cheerleading as a freshman something unheard of at our school, the local newspaper featured her on the front page. That same week, I'd won the state debate championship, earning a small mention buried on page 6. Mom framed Hila's article and hung it in the living room. My trophy gathered dust on my bedroom shelf. "You're just different types of special," Mom would say whenever I dared voice my hurt. But we both knew which type of special mattered more in our house. College offered temporary escape from the Golden Girl comparisons. At Henderson and Associates, I threw myself into building something that was entirely mine, a marketing career where my strategic mind and analytical skills could finally shine. I arrived early, stayed late, volunteered for the impossible accounts that others avoided. My first year, I single-handedly saved the Peterson manufacturing contract when their previous account manager quit mid-campaign. The client personally requested me for all future projects. For the first time in my life, I felt valuable, irreplaceable even. The promotion to senior account manager seemed inevitable. I'd pitched the winning strategy for 3 major campaigns, brought in 2 new 6-figure clients, and consistently exceeded every performance metric. When Mr. Henderson called me into his office that Tuesday morning, I walked in expecting congratulations. Instead, he offered condolences about my disappointment and assured me that next time would be different. The promotion went to Jessica Chin, who'd been with the company half as long and had never landed a client worth more than $50,000. The explanation was vague, something about client relationship skills and team dynamics, words that felt like knives twisting in my chest. Watching Jessica move into the corner office I'd coveted felt like reliving every childhood disappointment. The same hollow ache, the same bewildered question, what was wrong with me? But then I found the dress. After months of half-heartedly browsing bridal magazines and websites, I discovered it tucked away in a small boutique downtown. The moment I saw it through the window, my breath caught. Ivory silk with delicate lace sleeves, a flowing train that whispered promises of fairy tale endings. It was elegant without being ostentatious, romantic without being frivolous. Everything I dreamed of but never dared hope for. The price tag made my stomach drop, $3,000. More than I'd ever spent on anything for myself. But standing in that fitting room, watching the way the silk caught the light, seeing how the lace made my skin glow, I felt beautiful for the first time in years. "Oh, honey," the saleswoman breathed when I emerged from the dressing room. "That dress was made for you." Even Mom, who rarely offered compliments that weren't comparative, smiled genuinely when I sent her the photo. "You look radiant, sweetheart. Absolutely radiant." I bought it that day, despite my modest salary and mounting student loans. For 8 months, I ate lunch at my desk, skipped coffee dates with friends, and walked to work to save on parking fees. Every sacrifice felt worth it when I glimpsed the dress hanging in my closet, wrapped in protective plastic like a precious secret. Then David walked into Murphy's coffee house on that rain-soaked Thursday evening, and everything changed. I ducked inside to escape the downpour, my presentation materials soaked despite my umbrella's best efforts. David was already there, laptop open, dark hair slightly mussed from his own battle with the weather. When he looked up and smiled, offering to share his corner table, I felt something shift inside my chest. "Rough day?" he asked, nodding toward my dripping folder. "Careering disaster, more likely." I laughed, surprised by my own honesty. He listened as I vented about the Peterson contract complications, asked thoughtful questions about my marketing strategies, and never once checked his phone. When I finally glanced at my watch, we'd been talking for 3 hours. "I should let you get back to your work," I said, gathering my now dry papers. "Actually," David said, closing his laptop, "would you like to continue this conversation over dinner, somewhere with better lighting and worse coffee?" Our first official date stretched until midnight. David had this way of making me feel like the only person in the room, like my thoughts and opinions mattered deeply to him. He was a software engineer with gentle hands and kind eyes, someone who preferred quiet bookstores to crowded bars, who remembered small details about my day and asked follow-up questions about projects I'd mentioned weeks earlier. For 6 months, we built something beautiful in private. Sunday morning farmers market visits where he'd buy me fresh flowers just because he liked seeing me smile. Quiet dinners where we discussed everything from childhood dreams to future plans. Long walks where comfortable silences felt as natural as conversation. David made me feel seen in ways I'd never experienced. He celebrated my small victories at work, offered comfort during setbacks, and never once made me feel like I was competing for his attention. Then came the family dinner that changed everything. "I can't wait to meet this mysterious boyfriend," Mom said over the phone. "Bring him to Sunday dinner this week. Hila will be there too. She's been dying to meet him." I should have known better. I should have remembered that Hila couldn't bear for anything to exist outside her gravitational pull. The moment David stepped into our childhood home, I watched my sister's eyes light up with interest that had nothing to do with sisterly curiosity. She appeared at the top of the stairs in a flowing sundress that perfectly matched her eyes, her hair cascading over her shoulders in waves that seemed to catch every ray of sunlight streaming through the windows. "So, you're the famous David," she said, extending her hand with a smile that could have powered the entire neighborhood. "I've heard absolutely nothing about you, which means my sister is either very secretive or very selfish." David laughed that easy, genuine laugh I'd fallen in love with, and I felt the first crack in my foundation. Throughout dinner, Hila peppered him with questions about his startup company, his hiking adventures, his plans for the future. She leaned forward when he spoke, laughed at his jokes with perfect timing, and shared just enough about her own life to seem fascinating without overshadowing him. I watched it happen in real time, the subtle shift in David's attention, the way his responses to Hila grew longer and more animated, while his answers to me became polite but distracted. By dessert, I felt like a stranger at my own relationship's funeral. "Your sister is amazing," David said on the drive home, his voice carrying a warmth that used to be reserved for me alone. That night, lying in bed beside my wedding dress, I finally understood what I'd been too naive to see before. Some shadows were too deep to escape, some golden lights too bright to compete with, but I had no idea how far Hila would go to ensure I never stepped out of the darkness again. The phone rang 3 days later while I was reviewing quarterly reports at my desk. "Hey, it's me." Hila's voice bubbled through the speaker with unusual enthusiasm. "I was thinking, since David seems so wonderful, why don't we all do something together this weekend? Maybe that new rooftop bar downtown. I could bring Marcus." Marcus was her latest conquest, a hedge fund manager she'd been seeing for exactly 2 weeks. The suggestion seemed innocent enough, but something in her tone made my stomach tighten. "I don't know, Hila. David and I were planning a quiet weekend." "Oh, come on. It'll be fun. Besides, I barely got to talk to him at dinner. I want to get to know the man who's stolen my sister's heart. Against my better judgment, I agreed. Saturday evening, I spent an hour getting ready, settling on a black cocktail dress that David had once said looked stunning on me. When we arrived at the bar, Ela was already there, wearing a flowing emerald dress that seemed to shimmer under the ambient lighting. She looked like she'd stepped off a magazine cover, while I suddenly felt overdressed and trying too hard. "David?" she exclaimed, standing to hug him with a kind of warmth typically reserved for old friends. "You look fantastic. That shirt brings out your eyes." Throughout the evening, I watched Ela work her magic. She remembered every detail David had mentioned at dinner, his college roommate's startup, his hiking trip to Colorado, even his favorite obscure band. When Marcus stepped away to take a call, she seamlessly shifted all her attention to David, leaning in conspiratorially as she shared stories about their mutual love of vintage vinyl records. "Wait, you have an original pressing Au Bleu train?" David's eyes lit up in a way I recognized, but had never been able to inspire myself. "In mint condition," Ela laughed, touching his arm lightly. "You'll have to come over sometime and listen to it properly. My sound system does it justice." The invitation hung in the air like a challenge I couldn't meet. I didn't own vintage records or high-end audio equipment. I didn't even particularly like jazz. Monday morning brought the first crack in my professional foundation. I arrived at Henderson & Associates to find my assistant, Patricia, looking uncomfortable as she approached my desk. "I'm sorry, but Mr. Henderson wants to see you immediately," she said, avoiding eye contact. "It's about the Morrison account." The Morrison account was my baby a tech startup campaign I'd been developing for 3 months. I'd crafted their entire brand strategy from target demographics to messaging architecture. The presentation was scheduled for Thursday, and I'd been polishing it obsessively. Mr. Henderson's office felt colder than usual as I sat across from his imposing mahogany desk. "I'm reassigning Morrison to Jessica," he said without preamble. "She'll be presenting your preliminary work this week." The words hit me like a physical blow. "Sir, I don't understand. Is there a problem with my approach?" "It's not about problems, it's about fit. Jessica has more experience with tech startups, but I landed the account. I've been developing the strategy since. The decision is final. You'll be taking over the Henderson Hardware refresh instead." Henderson Hardware was his brother's failing tool store, a pity project everyone knew was doomed. As I walked back to my desk, I felt eyes following me, whispers trailing in my wake. Jessica stood by the copier, studying what I recognized as my Morrison presentation materials, already making notes in the margins. The technical difficulties started small. An important email to a client disappeared from my sent folder, leaving me scrambling to explain why I hadn't followed up on their request. My calendar mysteriously cleared itself of a crucial meeting, causing me to miss a deadline by 3 days. A presentation file corrupted an hour before I was supposed to deliver it, forcing me to improvise with handwritten notes while my colleagues exchanged concerned glances. These things happen, I told myself, but the incidents were becoming too frequent to ignore. David's behavior began shifting around the same time. Our nightly phone calls, once lasting hours, dwindled to brief check-ins about scheduling and logistics. When we did spend time together, he seemed distracted, frequently glancing at his phone or bringing up topics I'd never heard him discuss before. "Isla mentioned this great hiking trail up north," he said during dinner one Tuesday evening. "She thinks we'd really enjoy it." "When did you talk to Ela about hiking?" "Oh, she texted me some recommendations. She's really thoughtful that way." The casual way he said it, like ongoing communication with my sister was perfectly normal, made my chest tighten. I wanted to ask when they'd exchanged numbers, what other recommendations she'd shared, why she was texting my boyfriend at all. Instead, I smiled and nodded, swallowing my questions like bitter medicine. The pattern continued. Ela would mention a restaurant she thought David would love, and suddenly he'd suggest we try it. She'd recommend a book, and I'd find it on his nightstand. Their inside jokes multiplied references to conversations I hadn't been part of, shared opinions about movies I'd never heard them discuss. Then Grandma Rose had her stroke. The call came at 6 o'clock in the morning. Mom's voice was shaking as she explained that Grandma had been found unconscious in her bathroom, that the paramedics were rushing her to St. Mary's Hospital, that we needed to come immediately. I threw on clothes and raced to the hospital, arriving to find Ela already there, holding Mom's hand in the waiting room. She looked perfectly put together despite the early hour, her hair styled and makeup flawless, while I felt like I'd been dragged through a hurricane. "The doctor says it was a massive stroke," Isla whispered, tears glittering in her eyes. "They're not sure about recovery." The next few days blurred together in a haze of hospital visits and difficult conversations. Isla appointed herself as Grandma's primary advocate, researching rehabilitation facilities, coordinating with doctors, and organizing family schedules with military precision. She slept in the hospital chair, held Grandma's hand during procedures, and somehow managed to look graceful even while keeping vigil. I tried to help, but my work schedule made everything complicated. The Henderson hardware project was imploding spectacularly, requiring damage control meetings and crisis management sessions that I couldn't simply abandon. When I missed 2 consecutive visiting hours due to client emergencies, Ila's disappointment was palpable. "I understand work is important," she said during one of our brief encounters in the hospital hallway, "but this might be our last chance to spend time with her." The guilt hit me like a sledgehammer. Other family members began echoing similar sentiments, gentle but pointed observations about priorities and presence. Aunt Carol mentioned how wonderful it was that at least one granddaughter could be there consistently. Uncle Jim praised Ila's devotion while shooting meaningful glances in my direction. Meanwhile, my professional reputation continued crumbling. The Henderson hardware campaign failed so spectacularly that the local business journal wrote an article about it, using phrases like tone-deaf messaging and strategic missteps. My name was prominently featured as the account manager responsible for the disaster. Jessica's Morrison campaign, built on the foundation of my work, launched to critical acclaim and industry recognition. She was interviewed by Marketing Weekly about her innovative approach to tech startup branding, discussing strategies I developed during countless late nights and weekend research sessions. David's calls became even less frequent. When we did talk, he seemed distracted, offering abbreviated responses to questions that once would have sparked long conversations. He canceled our Saturday to help a friend move, then postponed our makeup dinner because he was feeling under the weather. "Maybe we should take a little break," he said during what I didn't realize would be our last real conversation. "I've been feeling overwhelmed lately, and I think I need some space to figure things out." The words felt rehearsed, like he'd practiced them in the mirror. I wanted to fight for us, to demand explanations, to ask what had changed so dramatically. Instead, I heard myself agreeing that space might be good for both of us. That night, I lay in bed staring at my wedding dress hanging in the closet, wondering when everything had started falling apart. The foundation I'd spent years building, my career, my relationship, my sense of self, felt like it was crumbling beneath my feet. I had no idea that the destruction was just beginning, or that the architect of my downfall was closer than I'd ever imagined. The call came on a Thursday afternoon while I was drowning in damage control from another mysteriously botched client presentation. My laptop completely crashed. Ila's voice carried just the right note of helpless frustration. "I have this huge presentation for the art gallery tomorrow and everything's gone. You're so good with computers. Could you possibly come over and help me recover the files?" Despite everything that had happened, she was still my sister. Family obligation ran deeper than personal grievances, or so I told myself as I drove to her downtown apartment with my toolkit of recovery software. Ila's place was immaculate, as always, white furniture perfectly arranged, fresh flowers in crystal vases, not a single item out of place. She greeted me wearing yoga pants and an oversized sweater that somehow managed to look effortlessly chic, her hair twisted into a messy bun that probably took 20 minutes to perfect. "You're a lifesaver," she said, leading me to her home office. "The screen just went black during a system update. I'm terrified I've lost everything." The laptop sat on her glass desk like a patient waiting for surgery. I plugged in my external drive and began running diagnostic software while Isla hovered nearby, wringing her hands convincingly. "I'll grab us some tea while you work your magic," she said, disappearing into the kitchen. The recovery process was routine. I'd done this countless times for colleagues and friends. As files began populating on the screen, I absently scanned the folder names, looking for anything labeled gallery or presentation. Instead, my eyes caught on something that made my blood freeze. A folder named Sarah Work Stuff sat prominently in her documents directory. My hands trembled as I clicked it open. Inside were dozens of screenshots, images of my email inbox, my calendar, my private client communications. Each file was meticulously labeled with dates and project names. There were photos of documents from my desk, taken at angles that suggested they'd been captured quickly when I wasn't looking. The room seemed to tilt as I scrolled deeper. Notes written in Ila's neat handwriting accompanied many files. Client unhappy with timeline. Use this. Sarah stressed about Morrison deadline. Perfect timing. Henderson meeting moved to Thursday. She doesn't know yet. My throat constricted as the implications crashed over me. Every mysterious technical failure, every missed deadline, every moment when I'd felt like I was losing my mind, it had all been orchestrated. I heard Ila's footsteps returning and quickly closed the folder, my heart hammering against my ribs. When she appeared with 2 steaming mugs, I somehow managed to keep my voice steady. Almost done. Just need to run one more scan. You're amazing. I don't know what I'd do without you. The casual way she said it, like she wasn't systematically destroying my life, made bile rise in my throat. I finished the recovery process on autopilot, my mind reeling with the magnitude of her deception. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every interaction with Ila replayed in my head, viewed now through this horrifying new lens, the way she'd insisted on helping me organize my home office last month, claiming she wanted to understand my work better, how she'd borrowed my laptop when hers was acting up during family dinner, the innocent questions about my projects, my deadlines, my client relationships. I needed more evidence. Ila was capable of this level of manipulation. There had to be more. Over the next week, I became a detective investigating my own sister. Using techniques I'd learned during a cybersecurity seminar, I traced IP addresses from suspicious emails, cross-referenced timing with her social media posts, and followed digital breadcrumbs she'd been careless enough to leave behind. The fake email accounts were the first breakthrough. j.morrison.startup@gmail.com had been sending complaints to my supervisors, claiming I'd missed crucial meetings and delivered subpar work. The writing style was too polished, too perfectly crafted to damage my reputation without seeming overtly malicious. But the real smoking gun was hidden in her cloud storage, a voice memo she'd recorded and apparently forgotten to delete. Marcus, you won't believe how perfectly this is working out. Ila's voice bubbled with excitement through my headphones. David is practically eating out of my hand now. I mean, he was Sarah's boyfriend, but that just made it more interesting, like winning the ultimate prize. Her friend's voice was harder to hear, but Ila's responses painted a clear picture of their conversation. Of course, I feel bad for her, but honestly, she's always been so pathetically grateful for any scrap of attention from men. It's almost sad how easy this was. Ila's laugh was sharp, cutting. Besides, David deserves someone who actually challenges him intellectually. Sarah's sweet, but she's so ordinary. The recording continued for 12 minutes. 12 minutes of my sister dissecting my relationship, my personality, my worth as a human being with the clinical detachment of a scientist studying insects. The work thing is just bonus revenge for all those years of playing the perfect daughter, she continued. Do you know she actually thought she deserved that promotion? Like being a workaholic mouse somehow makes you executive material. I sat in my car in the parking garage, tears streaming down my face as I listened to her catalog my failures and inadequacies. This wasn't sibling rivalry or jealousy. This was something darker, more calculated. My investigation deepened. Email chains between Ila and my colleagues revealed a web of manipulation that stretched back months. She'd positioned herself as the worried sister, sharing concerns about my mental health and professional stability with people I trusted. I'm so worried about Sarah, she'd written to Jessica. She's been under tremendous pressure at work, and I think it's affecting her judgment. If you notice any signs that she's struggling, please let me know. Family is all we have, right? Jessica had responded with reassurance about keeping an eye on me, completely unaware that she was feeding information back to my saboteur. But the most devastating discovery came buried in her email drafts messages she'd composed but never sent, containing strategies for undermining my relationships with clients and colleagues. She'd mapped out my professional network like a military campaign, identifying weak points and planning her attacks with surgical precision. One draft made my hands shake as I read it. Phase 1. Establish credibility with Sarah's contacts as concerned family member. Phase 2. Document her vulnerabilities and stress points. Phase 3. Strategic interference with key projects. Phase 4. David? David had been part of her plan from the beginning. The engagement announcement came 3 weeks later, delivered with the theatrical flair Hila had perfected since childhood. I thought I was attending a regular family dinner Mom had mentioned, wanting to discuss Grandma Rose's care plan. I arrived straight from work, exhausted from another day of putting out fires I hadn't started, wearing a wrinkled blouse and yesterday's mascara. Hila was radiant in a flowing blue dress that matched her eyes perfectly. Her engagement ring, our grandmother's ring, the one I'd always been promised, catching the light as she gestured animatedly. David sat beside her, looking happier than I'd ever seen him, his arm draped possessively around her shoulders. "We have wonderful news," Mom announced, beaming with pride. "Hila and David are engaged." The room erupted in congratulations and tears of joy. Dad shook David's hand vigorously while Aunt Carol hugged Hila with genuine affection. Everyone was talking at once, sharing memories of their courtship, planning engagement parties and wedding dates. I sat frozen in my chair, watching the scene unfold like a nightmare in slow motion. This was my family celebrating my sister's engagement to my former boyfriend, wearing my grandmother's ring, planning their future together in the ruins of my own. "Aren't you going to congratulate your sister?" Mom asked, her voice carrying a note of reproach that suggested my silence was being noticed. "Of course," I managed, standing on unsteady legs. "Congratulations, Hila. You got everything you wanted." She looked at me with those beautiful blue eyes that had charmed everyone for 25 years. And for just a moment, I saw something cold and calculating flash across her features. "Thank you, Sarah. That means everything coming from you." As the family continued their celebration around me, I realized that Hila hadn't just stolen my boyfriend or sabotaged my career. She'd orchestrated the complete destruction of my life with the patience and precision of a master chess player, and she'd made it look like love. That night, I drove home in a daze. The weight of Hila's engagement ring burned into my memory like a brand. But as I sat in my empty apartment, surrounded by the wreckage of my former life, something fundamental shifted inside me. The grief and shock crystallized into something harder, sharper, a determination that surprised me with its intensity. I pulled out my laptop and created a new folder, Project Truth. What followed were the most productive weeks of my life, though not in any way my former self would have recognized. I became an investigator, a digital archaeologist, excavating the systematic destruction of my existence. Every evening after work, I spread documents across my dining table like a detective in a crime thriller, creating timelines that mapped Hila's interference against my professional failures. The pattern was breathtaking in its precision. Every major career setback coincided with a period of increased contact between Hila and my colleagues. The Morrison account reassignment happened 3 days after she'd had lunch with Jessica Chin. My calendar glitches always occurred within hours of Hila visiting our family home, where my spare laptop often sat charging in the kitchen. I printed email timestamps, cross-referenced social media posts, and documented every instance where Hila had positioned herself to gather intelligence about my work. The evidence filled 3 ring binders, each section marked with color-coded tabs that would have impressed my most meticulous project managers. The therapeutic value of this process surprised me. Each piece of evidence I cataloged felt like reclaiming a small piece of my stolen self-worth. I wasn't crazy, I wasn't incompetent. I had been systematically sabotaged by someone who knew exactly how to hurt me most effectively. But documentation alone wouldn't be enough. I needed leverage. The opportunity came sooner than expected. Saturday morning, I woke to my phone buzzing with a text from Hila, emergency. "Can't find my wedding dress anywhere. Did I maybe hang it in your closet when I was trying it on?" So panicked. My blood turned to ice as I rushed to my bedroom closet. The protective plastic bag that had held my dress for 8 months hung empty, swaying slightly in the morning breeze from my open window. She hadn't just stolen my dress. She'd wanted me to know about it, to feel the violation of her taking the one thing that represented my dreams of happiness. I stared at that empty bag for a full minute, feeling something cold and calculating settle into my chest where warmth used to live. Then I called her back. "Oh my goodness, Hila, that's terrible." I injected just the right amount of concern into my voice. "Let me check my closet thoroughly. Maybe it got pushed behind something else." "You're such a lifesaver. I'm absolutely frantic. The engagement party is tonight, and I had my heart set on wearing something really special." The casual cruelty of it, discussing wearing my dress to celebrate her engagement to my former boyfriend, required every ounce of self-control I possessed. "I'm so sorry, but it's definitely not here," I said, after making appropriate searching sounds. "Have you checked your spare bedroom closet? Sometimes things get misplaced during moves. I've looked everywhere. This is such a disaster." We spent 20 minutes on the phone, me offering suggestions while she performed increasing levels of distress. The entire conversation was a masterclass in manipulation. She knew I knew she'd taken it, and she wanted me to suffer in silence while pretending to help her. But two could play this game. My investigation expanded beyond digital evidence. I began reaching out to old acquaintances, approaching conversations with careful casualness that would have made Ila proud. "I was just thinking about you," I told Rebecca Martinez, a former colleague who'd transferred to our Boston office last year. "How are you settling in up there?" After appropriate catch-up pleasantries, I steered the conversation toward workplace dynamics. "It's funny how different office cultures can be," Rebecca said. "Like, people here are so direct compared to our old office. Remember how everyone was always worried about stepping on toes?" "What do you mean?" "Well, like when your sister reached out to warn people about your situation, everyone was walking on eggshells around you for months." My grip tightened on the phone. "My sister warned people about me?" "She was just looking out for you. Said you were going through a tough time dealing with some personal stuff that was affecting your work. She asked us to be patient with you and let her know if we noticed any concerning behavior." The conversation continued for another 10 minutes, but I heard little beyond the confirmation that Ila's campaign against me had been far more extensive than I'd realized. She'd been painting me as unstable to colleagues across multiple offices, creating a narrative of mental health struggles that explained away my professional difficulties while positioning herself as the devoted sister managing a family crisis. 3 more similar conversations revealed the scope of her character assassination. Former teammates admitted they'd been briefed about my alleged struggles. Clients had received subtle warnings about my reliability framed as family concern. Even my assistant, Patricia, had been approached with suggestions about how to support me through my difficult period. Each revelation added fuel to the fire burning in my chest. Ila hadn't just sabotaged individual projects, she'd systematically poisoned my professional reputation across the entire industry. The technical preparation phase began that Sunday. I spent the day learning video editing software, practicing until I could seamlessly splice audio clips and create presentations that would display flawlessly under pressure. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was using the same technological skills that had made me valuable at Henderson and Associates to orchestrate my sister's downfall. Ila's voice confession became the centerpiece of my presentation. I edited it for maximum impact, removing my friend's responses and combining her most damaging admissions into a 3-minute audio track that painted a devastating portrait of calculated malice. Her laugh, especially that cruel, delighted sound when she described stealing David as the ultimate prize, would haunt anyone who heard it. I created backup files, tested the audio quality on different speaker systems, and practiced the timing until I could execute the revelation with precision. The presentation included email screenshots, timeline correlations, and the voice recording, all organized to tell the story of betrayal with courtroom-level clarity. The days leading up to her engagement party passed in a strange bubble of calm. I'd expected to feel nervous or angry, but instead experienced an almost zen-like peace. For the first time in months, I knew exactly what was going to happen next. The uncertainty that had plagued me was gone, replaced by the quiet confidence that comes from holding absolute truth. I practiced expressions in my bathroom mirror, the surprised smile when seeing Ila in my dress, the gracious congratulations I'd offer for her engagement, the innocent confusion when technical difficulties began affecting the evening's entertainment. My reflection showed someone I barely recognized, composed, strategic, dangerous in a way that had nothing to do with emotional outbursts or confrontational drama. The woman staring back at me had learned to play Ila's game, and I intended to win. Friday evening, I laid out my outfit for the engagement party, a simple black dress that wouldn't compete for attention, modest jewelry that suggested humility rather than celebration. I wanted to appear as the overlooked sister, grateful to be included in such a joyous occasion. In my purse, I placed the small remote control that would change everything. The storm had been building for months, but tomorrow night it would finally break. Saturday evening arrived with the kind of crystalline clarity that makes every detail sharp and unforgettable. I drove to the Riverside Manor with my hands steady on the wheel, my heartbeat calm and measured. The venue Ela had chosen was predictably elegant: soaring ceilings, cascading chandeliers, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. She'd always had impeccable taste when spending other people's money. The valet took my keys with a polite smile, and I walked through the grand entrance carrying my small black purse and the weight of absolute certainty. The sound of laughter and clinking glasses drifted from the main ballroom, punctuated by the gentle hum of a string quartet. Then I saw her. Isla stood in the center of the room like a princess in a fairy tale, surrounded by a circle of admirers who hung on her every word. But it was my dress that made my breath catch. The ivory silk flowed around her like liquid moonlight, the delicate lace sleeves catching the chandelier light exactly as I'd dreamed they would. She'd even styled her hair the way I'd planned for my own wedding day, swept up in an elegant chignon with a few strategic curls framing her face. "Doesn't she look absolutely radiant?" Aunt Carol gushed to Cousin Jennifer, their eyes bright with vicarious joy. "That dress could have been made for her." "Divine," Mom agreed, dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. "I've never seen her look more beautiful." The surreal quality of the moment threatened to overwhelm me. These people, my family, my blood, were celebrating the woman who had systematically dismantled my life, and they were doing it with genuine love and happiness. Their joy wasn't manufactured. They truly believed they were witnessing something magical. David stood beside Ela wearing a navy suit that brought out his eyes, the same eyes that used to light up when he saw me. His smile was radiant as he accepted congratulations and backslaps from family members, playing the role of devoted fiancé with Oscar-worthy conviction. "Sarah!" Ela's voice rang out like a bell as she spotted me across the room. "Come meet everyone. They're all dying to hear about how you introduced us." The twisted irony of that statement making me complicit in my own betrayal nearly broke my composure. But I'd practiced for this moment. My smile felt natural as I approached the group, my voice warm and sisterly. "You look absolutely stunning, Ela. That dress is perfect on you." "Thank you, sweetheart." I felt so guilty when I found it hanging in the back of my closet. I completely forgot I'd borrowed it for that wedding last month. But when nothing else felt right for tonight, she shrugged helplessly, her performance flawless. The casual rewriting of history, delivered with such convincing sincerity, was masterful. She transformed theft into an innocent misunderstanding, making me complicit in the lie by my silence. "I'm just happy it's getting the appreciation it deserves," I said, meaning every word in ways she couldn't imagine. The evening progressed with typical engagement party rhythms: speeches about love and destiny, toasts to the happy couple's future, and endless photo opportunities that Ela orchestrated with the precision of a film director. She made sure to include me in several shots, her arm around my shoulders as she smiled for the camera, the picture of sisterly love. "We should do a slideshow presentation," I suggested during a brief lull in the festivities. "I noticed you have that gorgeous photo display system set up. It would be lovely to share some memories of your relationship journey." Mom clapped her hands together. "What a wonderful idea, Sarah. You're so thoughtful." "I'd be happy to set it up," I offered. "I brought my laptop with some photos I thought you might enjoy." Ela's smile flickered almost imperceptibly. "That's sweet, but we didn't really plan for." "Nonsense," Dad interrupted, already slightly tipsy from the champagne. "Sarah's brilliant with technology. Let her work her magic." 20 minutes later, I had the projection system configured perfectly. The large screen descended from the ceiling like a theater curtain, commanding attention from every corner of the room. I tested the audio levels, adjusted the brightness, and loaded my files with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd spent countless hours perfecting this moment. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced, my voice carrying clearly through the sound system, "if I could have your attention for a special presentation celebrating Ela and David's journey together." The room quieted as guests turned toward the screen. Wine glasses paused halfway to lips, conversations trailing off into expectant silence. Ela stood frozen near the front, her face a mask of polite anticipation that couldn't quite hide the growing alarm in her eyes. The first slide appeared, an email chain between Ela and my former supervisor, dated 3 months ago. The subject line read, "Concerns about Sarah's professional stability." The text was large enough for everyone to read, her words projected in crisp, undeniable clarity. I'm worried about my sister's recent behavior at work, the email read. She's been making mistakes that seem out of character, missing deadlines, struggling with basic tasks. I think the pressure might be getting to her. Confused murmurs rippled through the crowd. I watched faces transform from celebration to bewilderment as they processed what they were seeing. Aunt Carol squinted at the screen, her champagne glass frozen in midair. "What is this?" Uncle Jim asked, his voice cutting through the growing tension. The slides continued automatically, each one more damaging than the last. Screenshots of fake client complaints Ela had sent to my company, evidence of her accessing my calendar to sabotage important meetings, documentation of her spreading rumors about my mental health to colleagues across the industry. Ela's face had drained of all color, the radiant joy replaced by stark horror as she realized what was happening. She lurched toward the projection controls, but Dad caught her arm. "Ela, what is this? What are we looking at?" "It's not what it looks like," she said, her voice rising with panic. "This is taken out of context. Sarah's been struggling, and I was just trying to help." Her words died as the audio began. The room filled with her own voice, crystal clear through the professional sound system. "Marcus, you won't believe how perfectly this is working out. David is practically eating out of my hand now. I mean, he was Sarah's boyfriend, but that just made it more interesting, like winning the ultimate prize." The collective gasp was audible. Mom's handkerchief fluttered to the floor as her hand flew to her mouth. David's face went ashen, his eyes fixed on Ela with growing horror. "Of course I feel bad for her," Ela's recorded voice continued, that cruel laugh echoing through the stunned silence. "But honestly, she's always been so pathetically grateful for any scrap of attention from men. It's almost sad how easy this was." "Turn it off!" Ela screamed, lunging for the controls again. "Turn it off right now!" But no one moved to help her. The family members who had always rushed to her aid stood paralyzed, watching their golden girl's mask disintegrate in real time. The recording played for another minute, long enough for everyone to hear her describe her systematic sabotage of my career, her calculated seduction of David, her complete lack of remorse for destroying her own sister's life. When it finally ended, the silence was deafening. David approached Ela slowly, his movements careful and deliberate. Without a word, he reached for her left hand. The engagement ring, our grandmother's ring, slipped off her finger and into his palm with barely a whisper of sound. He looked at it for a long moment, then placed it gently on the nearest table. "David, please," Ela whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Let me explain. This isn't what you think." He walked past her without a word, past the shocked family members, past the spilled champagne and abandoned appetizers, and out the door. The room erupted into chaos. Voices overlapped in confusion and accusation, family members demanding explanations, while Ela sobbed in my wedding dress, her perfect evening crumbling exactly as she had systematically dismantled my life. I stood quietly by the projection controls, watching the scales of justice finally balance themselves, and for the first time in months, I smiled with genuine happiness. The chaos reached a crescendo as Dad's voice boomed over the confused chatter. "Ela, explain this now." But Ila was already backing toward the exit, my wedding dress trailing behind her like the remnants of a shattered dream. Her carefully applied makeup streaked down her cheeks in dark rivulets, transforming her from radiant bride-to-be into something tragic and desperate. "This is all lies," she sobbed, gesturing wildly at the screen. "Sarah's sick. She's jealous and she's made all of this up. Can't you see what she's doing?" Mom stepped forward, her face pale but determined. The voice recording, "Ela, that was your voice." It was edited, manipulated. Sarah's always been good with computers. "Enough." The word came from Grandma Rose, who had been silent until now. Despite her recent stroke, her voice carried the authority of 8 decades. "I raised you better than this." Ila's frantic gaze swept the room, searching for a single face that might show sympathy or belief. Instead, she found only disappointment, shock, and growing understanding. Uncle Jim shook his head slowly. Cousin Jennifer covered her mouth in horror. Even the catering staff had stopped serving, transfixed by the unfolding drama. "You're all turning against me because of her lies," Ela whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. The fight was draining out of her as surely as the color had drained from her face. I walked calmly to the projection controls and switched off the display. The sudden darkness seemed to break whatever spell had held the room frozen. "I think we've seen enough for one evening," I said quietly. Ela fled then, pushing through the crowd in a rustle of stolen silk, leaving behind the engagement ring on the table and the ruins of her carefully constructed life. I watched her go with a sense of completion that felt almost sacred. As the ballroom emptied around me, guests departing in confused clusters, whispering among themselves, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. The weight I'd carried for so long, the constant second-guessing, the crushing self-doubt, it all lifted like fog burning off in morning sunlight. I was free. The next few days brought a parade of difficult conversations. Mom called first, her voice heavy with exhaustion, and something that might have been shame. "I owe you an apology," she began without preamble. "Several apologies, actually. I don't know how I missed what was happening. I don't know how I failed you so completely." The conversation lasted 3 hours. Mom cried. I cried. We talked about favoritism and golden children and the damage done by decades of unequal treatment. It wasn't easy, but it was honest in ways our family had never managed before. Dad's apology came in person, delivered in my apartment with tears in his eyes and hands that shook as he spoke. "I taught her that charm could excuse anything," he said. "I rewarded her manipulation because it was pretty and made me feel good about myself as a father. I'm so sorry, sweetheart." The family reckoning continued throughout the week. Aunt Carol admitted she'd always felt something was off about Ela's perfection, but had dismissed her instincts. Uncle Jim confessed he'd seen Ela bad-mouthing me at family gatherings, but had assumed it was typical sibling rivalry. One by one, they came forward with their own pieces of the puzzle, their own moments of uncomfortable clarity they'd chosen to ignore. Grandma Rose's conversation was perhaps the most healing. "I always knew you were the stronger one," she said during her hospital visit. "Isla needed constant praise to function. But you built yourself from the inside out. That takes real character." She removed her engagement ring, the one Ela had worn and abandoned, and pressed it into my palm. "This belongs with someone who understands that love isn't a competition to be won." The professional vindication began with an unexpected phone call. "Is this Sarah Mitchell?" The voice was crisp, professional. "This is Catherine Walsh from Sterling & Associates. I believe we need to talk." Sterling & Associates was Henderson 813's biggest competitor, known for ethical practices and employee loyalty. Catherine had heard about my situation through industry channels. Apparently, Ela's campaign against me had been more transparent than she'd realized to people who knew what to look for. "We've been watching your work for some time," Catherine explained during our lunch meeting. The Morrison campaign in particular showed remarkable strategic thinking. "We always wondered why you weren't advancing at Henderson." Within a month, I had a new job with a salary increase in a team that valued my contributions. Former colleagues from Henderson began reaching out with apologies and explanations. Jessica Chin called to confess that she'd been fed information about my instability that had influenced her treatment of me. "I should have questioned it," she said. "Your work was always stellar. I let personal politics cloud my professional judgment." Marcus Rivera, who'd been promoted over me twice, admitted that Ela had approached him with concerns about my reliability just before his second promotion interview. She made it seem like she was protecting the company from a potential liability. I'm ashamed I believed her. The revelation that my struggles had been artificially created opened doors I'd thought were permanently closed. Project proposals I'd submitted years earlier were suddenly being reconsidered. Clients who'd been told I was unreliable reached out to apologize and explore working together again. But the most profound changes were internal. I started therapy with Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a specialist in trauma recovery and gaslighting survivors. Our sessions helped me understand the depth of psychological manipulation I'd endured and developed tools for recognizing and countering such behavior in the future. "You survived a systematic campaign designed to destroy your sense of reality," Dr. Rodriguez explained during one session. "The fact that you were able to gather evidence and fight back shows remarkable resilience and intelligence." Learning to trust my own perceptions again was perhaps the hardest part of recovery. Years of having my reality questioned had left me second-guessing every instinct, every emotion, every decision. Dr. Rodriguez helped me recognize that my instincts had actually been accurate. I had sensed something was wrong even when I couldn't identify the source. The woman who emerged from this process bore little resemblance to the one who had tolerated Ela's cruelty for so long. I learned to set boundaries, to demand respect, to recognize manipulation tactics before they could take root. Most importantly, I learned that I deserved love and success on my own merits, not as consolation prizes distributed by people who felt sorry for me. 18 months later, I met Thomas at a professional conference. He was a consultant specializing in crisis management, drawn to my presentation on rebuilding professional reputation after systematic sabotage. Our first conversation lasted until the hotel bar closed, covering everything from business ethics to favorite books to childhood dreams. "You have this amazing strength," he told me during our third date. "Not the kind that comes from never being hurt, but the kind that comes from surviving hurt and choosing to keep growing." Our relationship developed slowly, built on honesty and mutual respect rather than desperate need or competitive dynamics. Thomas celebrated my successes without feeling diminished by them. He supported my ambitions without trying to redirect them. Most importantly, he saw me clearly not as a reflection of his own worth, but as a complete person deserving of love. When I bought my new wedding dress, I chose it for me alone. Champagne-colored silk with subtle beading, elegant without being ostentatious, beautiful without being desperate for attention. It represented the woman I'd become rather than the woman I'd hoped someone else might love. The wedding was small, intimate, filled with people who knew my story and celebrated my strength. As I walked down the aisle, I caught sight of Ela in the back row. She'd sent a card requesting permission to attend, and I'd granted it. She looked older, quieter, diminished in ways that had nothing to do with physical appearance. She was no longer the golden girl commanding every room's attention. She was simply another face in the crowd. And for the first time in our lives, that felt exactly right. The truth has set us both free, thought in very different ways,